2 hours, as I understand, for lunch. I will invite the three speakers of the next session, who are Marisa Matias, an economist and member of the European Parliament from the Left Bloc in Portugal, and Vice President of the Party of the European Left, Professor David Jacobson, Emeritus Professor of Economics in Dublin University, and Panagiotis Pantelidis, who is an economist, and he belongs to the Committee for Radical Left Rally in Cyprus. So we will continue in the same track, let's say, of the first panel, talking about experiences of the countries that are inside memoranda policies. I will give 20 minutes for start to the speakers, and hopefully we will have some time to elaborate more on the questions that prevailed in the first session and that will definitely prevail in the second one. So I give the word to Marisa.
Good morning to everyone. First of all, let me just clarify, I'm not an economist.
Congratulations.
I don't feel guilty. I don't feel guilty for that. But it seems it's not only economic policy which is taking the major part of our lives, but also in terms of the dominant position. So I'm so sorry, I'm not going I'm not able to speak in the same economical detail as the previous speakers. And we did an arrangement in order that I could speak, because I have to go back after lunch. So in the after lunch, in the afternoon, you have a true Portuguese economist, Mariana. she would be the one talking here in this panel. So I'll provide some information about Portugal, of course, and but I would like also to raise some issues and questions. I'm sorry, but due to the time constraints, I have to more or less try to fit both the subjects in this presentation. What we have seen, and I think that we had three very interesting and complete interventions in the first part of the debate. What we have seen, it's not very different from what is happening in Portugal, although I think that we need to take into account that all the contexts are different. So we have similar recipes with similar impacts, although in different contexts, and that's in line with what has been said with the previous speakers. So what we have is, in fact, that the European Union and the European institutions were more or less in a kind of state of denial about the crisis until 2010. And then they passed from the state of denial to a state of mistake, a permanent mistake. And that's one of the problems that we are facing, in the sense that, of course, we know that, and I do agree with what has been said, considering the situation in Greece, in Ireland, and in Spain. But I do agree that a lot of these policies were already in place. In Portugal, we were already in the fourth Stability and Growth Pact before the Troika memorandum, but austerity was already there, and all these arrangements were already in place. But there are some differences, nevertheless. And the differences have to do not only with the massive attack that we were facing with the excuse of Troika, or almost Troika, as is the case in Spain. It's not, in fact, there's no, I would say that, but I'll take it for another period of the intervention. So the things were already there, but Troika was the tool, the instrument which enabled that the reforms were put into place, into practice, in a much more intensive way, and used as a huge excuse, as we know, to really devote entire economies which are devastated economically and socially to the main goals of these policies, which is, as it was already referred, but I want to emphasize it, it is of course to repositionate the European Union in the global competition system. That's in fact what is at the stake. And as we know, the only way of doing it is to impoverishment of the European populations and economies. There's no other way in this way of thinking. That's the framework. And the other goal, of course, is there as well, is to restore the profits of the financial system. In the case of Portugal, and to provide some data, when we had the signature of the Memorandum of Understanding with the Troika institutions, the sovereignty debt bonds were mainly bought at the time by the commercial banks, and in particular German commercial banks. It was about 80% of the bonds were out of the country and in the commercial banking system. 2 years after that, when we look to where are the bonds of the sovereignty debt, the Portuguese sovereignty debt, 75% of them are now in the European institutions or in the national banking system. There was, in fact, an adjustment and a bailout, but it was of the financial sector, and it is similar to Portugal and to the other countries. So we see how these figures and the indicators that we have show that the restoring the profits of financial system is at the key core of the entire intervention. So we also have a debt trap. I will not repeat what Maria said, because I think that what is happening in Greece is exactly in the same line of what is happening in Portugal. We have a debt trap with the same kind of narrative why we should do it, and so I'm not going to repeat it. And we also have the same problem of having no option but to try to impose deficit reduction based on public spending. And we know what that means. Cuts in wages and pensions and welfare states and public services is similar for everyone as well. There's no much difference. I would say that the main specificity for the Portuguese case is that although we have a huge cut in terms of wages and pensions and welfare state, social state, although all of this has happened, public spending is still growing and not being reduced. So it is being reduced in some of its major slices, but it's still growing, which means something, and in our case is due to the huge increase of unemployment. We have two major pieces of public spending. One is unemployment, and the second one is the interest rates that we have to pay for the loan. So these are the major pieces of the slice of the public debt. Nevertheless, all the rest has been reduced as much as possible. So, as I said, there are some differences in terms of the context, but at the end we have the same decrease in GDP. 2 years we had about almost 10% of reduction of GDP. We have high increase of unemployment, and we have a huge deregulation of labor market, and all the things all the other dimensions that have been presented here, with an increase of cost of living of more than 20%. And that's a kind of our common tragedy, even that we have, as I said, different contexts. But I would like to as I'm here and I'm not speaking in the panel, I had assumed to speak, but you know that we have a lot of things to do at the same time. I would like to use this time to raise other issues, which in fact I think are some of the difficult questions that we have to deal with, because I think that we have done all the diagnosis, and we also have a lot of proposals which are already assumed as an alternative proposal. But nevertheless, we still have a lot of difficult questions that we have it's not only difficult to answer, as we have no easy answers or easy proposals, simple proposals in these times. And that puts us in a situation, I think that Greece might be an exception to that, but that put left-wing forces in a situation of being always in a defensive position. And that's something which difficults our work in a very hard way, because we take explaining the explanation, because we lost the battle of the ideology, we lost the battle of common sense. Those battles were totally gained by right-wing way of thinking, and that's part of our difficulties, how to manage and how to deal with these in a context where these main battles have been lost. Because unfortunately, in Portugal, and I think that in Greece, in Ireland, and in Spain as well, a lot of people do think that they were living over their possibilities, that they are somehow guilty of this crisis, and that some order had to be put in the public accounts in order to get out of a system which was an indebtedness system, and we were being totally loaded by that, so we would need to clean that. And in fact, if it wouldn't be like that, we wouldn't have so many difficulties in trying to pass an alternative answer, because a lot of people do believe in that. And when we come and we say, okay, but fiscal consolidation is not that, then we have to explain why. And when we have to explain also, yes, we also want to have clear and transparent public accounts. We don't want the contrary, but that's not synonymous, that's not similar to what he's been doing. So we pass all the time explaining why the terms which were appropriated by the right wing do need to have other meanings, political meanings, social transformation meanings, which are not those who were explained and accepted by everyone as the sole explanation. It's like, together with there's no alternative paradigm, we have also there's no other way of giving meaning to the words nowadays, and that's part of our problem. So we know very well that we have to face immediate challenges. Austerity, I think, is a major dividing line, and also here we have difficulties, but is a major dividing line. Austerity is not the key condition and cause for economic and social devastation, as it is also the key condition and cause for the emergence of populism, of poor against poor, of inequality, of the rise of the far right in some countries in Europe. This is also due to austerity. So it's not only social and economic devastation, but we also have to deal with the issues associated with inequalities, racism, xenophobia, women's rights. Is not only a neoliberal wave that we have to face, but also a neoconservative way. We are now facing battles that I wouldn't imagine that in Spain we would have to talk about again about the abortion rights for women so many decades after these conquers. So this is the type of challenges that we have to face as well. And one of the most difficult challenges has to do with democracy. As democracy has been one of the main victims of the Troika and crisis-related interventions. We know there's a huge discrepancy between the social majority and political majority. That's true. But we also know there's a huge distrust in political forces, no matter if they are from right wing or left wing. So people don't care. They are not interested anymore. That's why 15 de Março or other movements, they gain so much force in such a moment. But there's a common guideline against politicians, against political system, and this is something that I think we have to take part of that as responsible for that situation as well. It's nothing that happened as a natural catastrophe or a divine will. It is also part of our responsibility. How can we deal with it? How can we repositionate ourselves in terms that we can seem more trustable to people than the others? And it is not happening, with, of course, some exceptions. And I hope that from Greece we'll have really something different from what is happening in other countries. So if in Greece there's some different trends, in Portugal, in Spain, in Ireland, the majority, the dominant line is still the line of success. Independently of the devastation, as I said, the social and economic devastation. In fact, what is talked about all the time and in prime time is that the efforts and the sacrifices were useful, and that now finally we will start to recover and we will start to grow and we will have the basis for something different. And in societies which are so devastated, people really need good news. And how can we promote the alternative based on a new model of refounding Europe, refounding our country, refounding democratic system, but giving good news and not only all the time talking about the being, I don't know how to say it in English, I'm trying to use the expression, but like being the prophets of the disgrace. And that's also part of some of the reflections I think we need to make. Because if we have such a social majority which do not correspond to a political majority, something must be wrong as well with the way we are doing things. It's not just because of the others that have more space or more capacity or more means, and it's not, and of course there's a huge unequal relation of powers, but that cannot explain everything. So that's part of the reflections, honestly, that I think that sometimes I would like that we would go deeper on that. So we have a feminist left, ecological left, we have trade unions, we have social movements, we have political left, and we have all these types of. We had the first attempt, I think that there are always good news in the middle of that. We had the first attempt of having an European strike just 1 year and a half ago. We have massive protest movements in Portugal, in Greece, in Spain, not organic, of course, but we have massive protest. We have at least, but they have been lost over the last time. Last week, in fact, in Portugal, we had the major demonstration ever of security and forces and police organizations, which is something new also, and something that we have to deal with. But normally we don't see them. But it's also a sign that austerity measures don't leave empty any space, any sector of society, including those who normally are in the other side of the demonstrations. They did the major demonstration ever in Portugal for the democracy. So our answers, of course, we have to deal with this, but our alternatives have to pass, of course, by facing the key problems that we have in front of us. Debt is a key issue, and we have to deal with it, and we have to frame it as a problem which is not a Greek problem, an Irish problem, a Spanish problem, a Portuguese problem, a Cyprus problem. It is an European problem. The problem of the debt is in fact a problem, because even that none of the targets in any adjustment program has been accomplished, none of them in any country. Nevertheless, the success is the narrative which has won the debate. But neither deficit nor debt, nothing has been accomplished according to the rules and to the memorandum which has been defined by those who do the evaluation, and then they are able to come and to say that everything is going okay and now we are in better condition to come back to the markets. And in the case of Portugal, we were not in condition to be able to get to the markets with 80% of the GDP public debt and 90% of public deficit, but now we are in much better condition with 132% of the public debt, and this is really accepted by people. It's true that now that we did this way, now we are in condition to go to the market, in much better condition. But the markets which didn't accept us with 80% of public debt will accept us with open arms with 132% of public debt. That's ironically said, but that's what is happening. So divergence is another issue, and I think this is really a threat. Inequalities have increased amongst the different European countries and within each European country. And divergence is really threatening the European project as much as the economic and social crisis is threatening it. We really have this dominant narrative, and I'll finish today, of saying that virtuous people live in the north and the lazy ones live in the south, with some exceptions to the Irish, which are more or less lazy as well, but are not very well. But there's this narrative, in fact, confronting peoples with levels of productivity when we know that the concentration of wealth and of capital has nothing to do with productivity and with the productivity, how do you say that in economia produtiva. With productive economy, but with speculation and with the casino economy. But nevertheless, all these things are being just used as a boomerang effect. I think we cannot leave out in any moment human rights issues. And we tend to spend a lot of time talking about this, and I think that we do need to know more about our situations, but we cannot leave aside human rights. We cannot also leave aside the fact that we need to reinforce the role of trade unions, but we have to recognize that the labor force in Europe is nowadays a labor force which the majority of them don't have proper labor contracts. So the majority of the labor force in Europe is precarious. There's no one to represent them, not even trade unions. So the labor is being attacked as much as we know. They're deregulated, cuts in wages, but the vast majority of the workers in Europe don't even have organized systems to be defended. So political parties, trade unions, all of us, we need to make huge reflections on this. So we are now facing an European Union which has been constructed on the basis of the internal market and on the basis of the regulation of the financial markets, and which has used the economic crisis as the best excuse to destroy in a very effective way the social state. We are now talking in the context of the European Union, which became authoritarian and impositive inside borders and totally fragile outside borders in terms of the global context. And that's the main ground and condition which gives the space to all these measures, which are not wrong policies. They are not wrong. They are totally right to accomplish the goals that they have in mind. So they are more than perfect. They are right for that purposes. So there are no wrong policies. That we have different political projects and transformation of societies, but they are not incompetent as well. They are very competent. They are much more competent than we wish that they would be. So our challenge is how to face this negative integration in the European Union and the Eurozone. We have never ever had in such a level of integration, deep level of integration like we had after the economic crisis, and we never had such a negative integration. It's huge but negative. So all the promises of a social Europe have been left out over the last years. So I think that, I'm sorry because I was more or less talking about my main concerns and not, but I think that these are part of the things we have to think also when we are talking about the impacts of Troika, social and economic impacts, and the way we are going to get out of it, and trying to gather forces of the different lefts which exist in Europe and to bring to people an effective proposal of social transformation, and not using all the time that we have available to talk about the others, because they have so much time to talk about themselves, that I think that sometimes we use our time just to provide even more prime time to the political line, which is already gaining the terrain. So how to use it to make our own proposals. And I spent the time, sorry, but I think that this is the divergence, the debt issues, democracy issues, human rights issues, and the lost battle of common sense are also at the core of our reflections as much as deficit and debt. And I think we should not be kidnapped as left by the obsession of deficit and debt. Thank you so much.